Boker Tov, everybody. So I want to talk about a part of this week's portion that I don't think gets often discussed. And it's the moment where Moses comes back into Egypt, and he comes before Pharaoh, and he puts down the staff turns into a serpent, right? The serpent then, Pharaoh then tries to do the same thing, with his his court magicians. They do the same thing, but then of course Moses's staff serpent eats the other ones, right? So that's not something that we necessarily often talk about. It's a little bit of an interesting development in the story. And if you think about the last time that we really had a serpent sort of come into the forefront of the story, right? It was in Bereshit, right? In the beginning of the story, when the serpent was at the tree, right? And convinced Chava to eat of the fruit. So it's an interesting juxtaposition, right? That here we have, it was the beginning of the last book before this one. Now we're in Exodus, and we're towards the beginning of Exodus. And here we have a serpent again, but this time it's a little bit different, but it's also a little bit similar if you really think about it, because the serpent in Bereshit, right, in the book of Genesis, was sort of a test that was sent by God. And you could say that the serpent, the staff serpent, also is a bit of a test. First of all, on Moses for leaning on his brother to help with leadership, which I think is important, because Moses may have been the greatest prophet of all times, but he still recognized that he sometimes needed help. He was a humble man, and he leaned on his brother for help, because Aaron also helped him to put the staff down when it turned into a serpent. But I think it's also a test of Pharaoh. This is Pharaoh's first test. And this is really a foreshadowing of all that's to come, right? Because we see that Pharaoh misses the mark here, because he has the first opportunity before any plagues happen. He has a first opportunity to recognize God and to recognize the plea to let the people go, right? To let the Hebrew slaves go. And he decides not, even though he sees right before his very eyes, not just that the staff turned to a serpent, which is miraculous. His magicians were able to do something similar, right? But the staff was there, but theirs were eaten by that one, right? So that's a moment where God is proving superiority over the magicians. And but he doesn't pay attention to that. And I think that's the moment where he really starts to dig down. It doesn't mention really anything about the heart hardening. We see that with the plagues, right? But I think this is the first moment where we see what's going to come in the story. And just like the serpent appeared at the beginning of all the stories, right? At the very, very beginning, this is the beginning of our story as a people and as a redeemed people. But it begins with Pharaoh's test. So sometimes it's important to watch out for those moments of where are those tests that we can find in our lives, and hopefully instead of hardening our hearts, we can open up to those opportunities.